So the second session is actually a panel discussion about mental well-being beyond the pandemic. We have our panelists today, and you can turn your webcam on as I introduce you. Tze-Wei, I saw you turning your webcam on. Amy Ng, General Counsel Asia CBRE. Hello, Amy. Jessica Bartlett, Global Head of Finance, Crime, Legal for Barclays. We've got Julia Gorham, Partner International Employment Law for Seyfarth Shaw, and Tze-Wei Ng, Associate at Stephenson, Harwood. Now, you may remember Julia and Tze-Wei from one of our previous sessions. Tze-Wei, along with her colleague, was talking to gave a presentation about ESG, and Julia was talking about the future of work and the implication for international employers. So thank you very much all for joining today's session. It's great to have you. I think it's a very, very important topic. I'm sure everybody agrees, especially given what we've gone through in the last almost 2 years, especially in Hong Kong, where the culture is so that everybody loves to travel, and we've not been able to do that, at least without going into 21 days of quarantine. And just the whole conversation around mental well-being is being taken much more seriously than before the pandemic. But it's not to say that these issues did not exist before the pandemic or will cease to exist somehow after the pandemic is over. So I'm very glad to have all of you here to discuss this in further. And the idea of today's panel discussion is to kind of make sure that our attendees, and I'm just quickly seeing in my Zoom here that we've got around 232 in-house counsel in attendance right now, so no pressure. But the idea is to make sure that everybody goes back with some actionable insight, which they can straight away work on either today or tomorrow. And also, if, say, somebody is going through a difficult time in terms of mental well-being, that they can take something back from today's session and know that they are not alone, and that help is something that is out there or within as well. So without further ado, thank you very much. I'd like to start off with Julia Gorham. Now, how often companies in Asia generally dealing with mental health concerns? How are they dealing at the moment in your experience? Are they surprised by it at all? Are they much better prepared than they were previously, or are they ambivalent?
Look, I think a few companies were caught napping at the beginning of the pandemic, certainly by the scale of sort of mental health challenges. Those individuals who are working in sort of the bigger global organizations will have a lot more resources brought to bear on this topic, and they'll have experts, usually sitting within different departments who can help. I think also there's been a huge sort of array of approaches in Asia. We haven't felt the true impact, certainly of the Great Resignation impact. We've still got relatively high employment across Asia. And I think there's going to be a bit of a time lag with some of the mental health and sort of wellness issues that we will face in Asia. So I think using this opportunity now, as we're hopefully coming towards the end of the pandemic, to really get on top of some of the skills you can put in place and some of the strategies that certainly Amy and Jessica and others will talk about, is now is the right time. I think historically as well in Asia, a lot of this work has been left to the HR department. And what we can see from everyone's input is that the only way that an effective strategy works here is by having management buy-in at all levels. So executive management, people management, all the way down. It's not just an HR issue in terms of managing your risk.
Great, thanks. And Tze-Wei, as a private practitioner and working within the sort of industry sector you're working in, do you have any experience in how things have changed? Are the companies taking mental well-being seriously? Are you being asked to present or to talk about this internally with your clients?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And it's great to be on this panel on talking about this really important topic. So I come more from an ESG angle as we discuss ESG issues with clients. Indeed, I have noticed since COVID, how employee well-being is increasingly cited as an important topic under S of ESG. Arguably, employee well-being has always been squarely a topic under S. If you look at the Hong Kong List Code Disclosure Framework, fair employment labor practices, D&I, turnover rate, health and safety, these are all aspects that a company has to disclose on. But indeed, it is true, mental health is not independently listed, and therefore probably have been overlooked for way too long. And there is now more discussion about it, just like modern slavery was a big topic, and now employee well-being is hopefully the next one. And just today, I read a Forbes article where it says perhaps the trend is to have ESHG, where health is more explicitly mentioned. I don't know how far this new acronym would go, but definitely there is a trend of wanting to consider mental health more within the ESG universe. And I guess Julia already mentioned how this is a risk, but I also wanted to emphasize how, as we talk more about mental health, that this is not a standalone issue either. It is very closely tied to D&I. It is very closely tied to a general culture of inclusiveness of the company. And I understand we will go into this further later. Yeah.
Amy, I'd like to bring you in. And I think this is one of the questions that was asked by one of our attendees, and I believe it's an important question for all attendees right now, is what is some of the business case you or your colleagues have made for starting mental well-being initiatives in your organization? What can an in-house counsel say or present their case when they want to start something?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me to speak. I think, as Tze-Wei said, this is a really, really important topic for all of us, especially lawyers. Fortunately, I think as to the business case within our organization, I think mental well-being is always recognized as one of the very important initiatives for our employees. So the company has been aligned in relation to having this initiative within legal and for other business and functions as well. So most of our initiatives within CBRE, they've been largely internal. So within legal, we didn't really have a separate budget for these programs. But on the other hand, though, from the company perspective, since this is aligned with the company's objective, we've been able to actually have some very, very specific program for this. One example is we've had a dedicated hotline for employees who want to seek help on mental well-being issues, and these questions have been handled by professionals. So I think I agree with Julia. First of all, seek alignment from your company if possible. Work with your other functions like people, like HR. I think it's really, really important for the company to understand that employees are one of the most important assets of the company. So if you have support from management, from the business, and if you're working with the people's team, I find that it's a lot easier to roll out these initiatives within the company.
Yeah, sure. I've prepared some slides inspired by the discussion we've had, actually, the pre-panel discussion. And as Jessica mentioned, there are so many ways we can explain the why, and one of them is the business case of it. And so I will share just a few quick numbers on the business case of it. So as you can see here, actually, as I prepare for this panel, I found some very helpful figures from City Mental Health Alliance, Hong Kong, and also a consultancy set up by a former law firm partner, Brian Henderson. The consultancy is called Whole Business Wellness. And as you can see here, the figure, the mental health cost to employers in this 2019 survey is about 5.25 to 12.4 billion Hong Kong dollars per year. And it covers absenteeism costs, presenteeism, the cost in turnover, other costs like opportunity and reputational costs. But what I really want to point out is the huge proportion of presenteeism, which accounts for over 80% of all costs. And the other figure I thought was important to point out is the total cost associated with mental ill health represent 40 to 90 times EAP spending. So I guess the silver lining is that if we invest in it, there could be a huge payoff. Why is there, I think this figure also highlights some of the challenges with mental health issues, and that is perhaps it is hard to measure than other health conditions, and that there is still a continued stigma around it. As you can see, why presenteeism is such a huge issue is that with this figure here, also from City Mental Health Alliance, is that more than 83% of employees will still go to work even if they are suffering from mental health issue for a range of reasons. Sense of duty and work ethic, fear of negative review, there's just too much work, or peer or family pressure. How serious is presenteeism? With another set of figures, that is a pre-COVID UK survey shows that the days of productivity lost per year is 3 days to absenteeism, but 35 days to presenteeism. And an Asia survey shows that it is 4 days per month for senior staff since COVID. So again, it goes back to what my fellow panelists have also emphasized, like to have a strong mental health environment for the company, it does take a deeper review of the company's culture and general employment policies that is beyond HR. And for me, is seeing mental health as a key pillar to its overall ESG efforts.
Thank you very much. And so we'll be talking about some of those interesting data points that you mentioned. We will be talking about these in our discussion today, some of the topics around having a safe space to talk about the issues that you're facing. But it's very interesting. Thank you very much, Tze-Wei, for sharing that. I'd like to talk about, very importantly, work-life balance, especially during these times. So I'd like to just share my screen. We did a survey of the in-house counsel, all the attendees from the previous event. So all the attendees today, most of you have participated in this. So this is what the result of the survey was. We asked you, all of you, how do you foresee your work in the next 6 to 12 months? And a majority of you said, about 67% of you said that it will be increasing, where about 32% of you said that it will stay the same. And one person said it's decreasing, which is very interesting. Just one person out of 155 said that it will be decreasing. What is more important, I feel, is the next slide. Let me just share the next slide. Then we asked them, if you foresee your work increasing or staying the same, do you have, or do you believe you have enough time and resources to cover this extra work? And 56% of you said, no, you don't have the time or the resources to cover that extra work. These are people who said that their work is going to either stay the same or increase. So there's a big chunk of people who at this point of time are thinking, how are we going to deal with this in the future? How are we going to deal with all this work that will be coming in for them in the future? We did this panel discussion around mental well-being in our UAE in-house Congress, and one of our panelists, Andrew Cook, he mentioned that what good lawyers do well is to make sure that they know what their future, what their 1 month ahead looks like. So they are more on top of things. They're more on top of the work that is going to come in, which means that they will be able to either assign enough resources to it or actually take some time off or chunk of time off for themselves, which in turn makes there is less stress for them, which makes them mentally well. Actually, it translates to that. So just talking about this sort of dynamic, Julia, I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts about the results and also the future of work, the flexible working or the working from home, working from office?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not overly surprised to see that last graph that you put up saying that, over 70% of people wanted to continue to work flexibly in some form or other. That maybe is driven by this group, knowledge workers, as we're all called in the legal profession, have seen a huge uptake in sort of positivity around, proving that we were able to deliver during sort of remote work and work from home, and wanting that flexibility to continue. I think as we talk to the squeeze generation, that's particularly, so that's the guys in between, young kids and older parents, that becomes particularly critical. And that's something that companies have to focus on going forward. But we also have to balance, the Gen Zers who do need that little bit of sort of working in the office time and sort of more connection and sort of, I guess, delivering promise on their career on a going forward basis. And some of that does require connection in slightly more traditional ways. But what I think it has broken down, as Tze-Wei said with the slides, is that sort of breaking down presenteeism is particularly important in Asia. And I think, we can all be respectful as managers of people saying, right, if I demand you to be on a 7 a.m. Zoom call, and I'm going to require you to be in the office, then when are you going to get your stuff done? So looking at marginal time and saying, can I give you, right, take 2 hours off at 11 o'clock, go to the gym, go walk your dog, whatever it may be. We as managers need to help direct that, because some people will not ask for that themselves. So we can anticipate things that are better for other people. I think that's going to come onto the psychological safety point that we wanted to talk about as part of this panel, which is just giving people the freedom to speak up and know that requests are going to be treated with respect, as Jessica talked about, and that we will sort of take into account the full circumstances of individuals that we work with. We're not going to make assumptions about what is right for our teams. Let's listen to them properly and actually sort of figure out what we can actually deliver for them.
Thank you very much. And I realize I've been going back and forth a little bit with my questioning over here. Just going back in the previous the previous slide, we were talking about. Let me just try to share my screen again. We're talking about whether you foresee your work increasing and do you have enough resources for it? And most of the people said, no, they don't have much resource for it. Amy, I'd like to ask you, how can you better manage your workload and try to be proactive so that you know what kind of work is coming in, or how do you have to kind of manage your resources around it as an in-house counsel?
Yeah, Rahul, so that's a really, really good question. That's a constant question that we try to manage. I think there's a couple of points, and I'll try to share some of the practical tips that we've been using. I think within the legal team, we talk a lot among some team members and try to really understand what each counsel or team in each country they're doing, their workload, their bandwidth, and then see if there are room for teams to work together to sometimes juggle workload and timeline. We try to actually set out some agreed workable protocols, for example, on replying and working after hours. So, if things are not urgent, I think we agreed within the legal team that maybe, we wait until Monday just to manage, obviously, the timeline a lot better. But I think most importantly, to go with what I've just said, it's important to actually communicate that with business leaders, again, to try and have alignment with them and actually set expectations on timeline and delivery, etc. For me personally, and I think we've just spoke about this before as well, is really consciously trying to plan my day or week better. And then obviously once really understand, what kind of timeline delivery I have within the week. And then once there's a plan, for me personally, is try to actually stick with the plan as well. So I think these are some of the practical tips for work-life balance.
Great, thank you very much. And Jessica, do you have anything to share with us, and how do you keep on top of your sort of workload and maintain that work-life balance?
That could be the $60,000 question sometimes. I think there are things that you can plan for and there are things that you can't. But one of the things that I have always found that works is and I encourage my team to do, is to be transparent as much as you can about what the actual timelines are, and to discourage practices that I think are not helpful, like false deadlines. I don't think that's very respectful of people's times, and it makes it very difficult for people to manage their schedule. And I still find that it is a very simple thing, but it's asking people what their timelines actually are. It is still amazing to me that people just don't supply that. They have an expectation that they don't define for you. And if they don't define it for you, how can you prioritize appropriately? So that's something I've always done. I'm very direct about it. What is the timeline? And if it's not achievable, then I can get in front of that immediately instead of being on the back foot 3 days later when things are stretched. I think another aspect which has been helpful is, as a team, we have identified what we call our non-negotiables. They're not strictly speaking non-negotiable. Everything can sort of be negotiable depending on a crisis arising. But basically, there are times for each individual that there are things that are priorities to them that we really do our utmost to leave untouched if we can, and it's only in kind of real crisis type situations that we have to invade on that time, and that's defined by the individual. That may be family time for some people, that may be gym time for other people. We have team members who are big sport fans. Don't you dare interrupt certain games, because this will just it's very important to them, and that's fine. That's their space, that's their time. They're not 100% employee, right? They are their own individual as well, and we respect that, whatever those things happen to be. And I think that's been really useful to have people actually define what their non-negotiables are and speak openly about it, and that it's fine to have a non-negotiable. I think those are some of the things that we've done over here, which have been quite useful.
Thank you very much, Jessica. As private practice lawyers, Tze-Wei and Julia, I'd just like to ask you that it's not always necessary that you can kind of plan ahead, because things might come up at any given time and you have to respond to it quite quickly. In that sense, how do you go about having a clear idea of how your day looks like, or how do you deal with that sort of stress, whether it is a stress for you or not?
Sure. Yes, as you ask whether we can be proactive, I definitely think there's room for proactive, like have more control, but at the same time, it's really the nature of our work that there's a lot of things that we couldn't control. So I think being at peace with that is also important, but like trying to still like carve out chunks of the day to do things that like require more focus and writing and communicate that. I think both Amy and Jessica talk about transparency and importance of communications. I definitely think that is key. But I also really need to credit my team here. I work in a team where my partner sets a good example for that transparency, really encouraging us to be supportive of each other, knowing that we're all juggling family and work, and especially during COVID time. And he also takes the lead in communicating with clients if there is demand over weekends, really respecting our day offs as much as we can. So I do appreciate how much our team is comfortable in telling each other that we need help and try to step up when we can. So I realize I'm quite lucky that I'm within part of a team like this. Yeah.
Great. That's wonderful. Actually, if you have your immediate kind of your colleagues actually hearing you out and having that flexibility around your work schedule, I think that's great. And I'd like to just share my screen again and show the attendees the results of one of the surveys that they participated in. Just give me a second over here. Right. So we asked everyone, what is your current work situation? What are you doing at the moment? How are you taking your work? 53% said they're working from the office. 53% of all you today present, most of you, I would say, said they're working from home. Where 38% said they're flexible working from home or office, and 9% of you said you're working from home. That's the current situation. And then the next question was, what would your ideal work mode look like? And majority, 78% of you said flexible working, where 14%. So a lot of people who are currently working from the office, 53, a good chunk of those 53%, would rather have flexible working and not go to work, not go to office. And if you go back, working from home, we had 9% working from home. Currently, the 8% again would like to work from home. But majority of you would like to work flexibly. Now, me personally, I like to work from home at the moment because of various reasons. One including we've got a 5-month-old son, and it's just great to be here, to be at home, and to have that, to give some of my time to family, and also as a business owner. We don't have an office per se at the moment, so it saves us some cost of getting an office where we can work from home. We've done a bunch of events and publications without actually having a physical space at the moment. So personally, I like working from home. And just to give on a lighter note, in 1665 during the bubonic plague, Isaac Newton had to work from home, and he used his time to develop calculus and theory of gravity. I don't know how to feel about that. Whether it's a good thing or no, especially about calculus, but great things can come out from working from home or working from wherever you feel most comfortable and most flexible in. Now, on that note, actually, I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I think I've kind of asked Julia this question already, but I'd like to ask Amy, working remotely and at times, when you're working from, sorry, I thought I stopped sharing this. Right. So, Amy, working remotely and at times working from home can be extremely isolating for a lot of professionals. And what can a lawyer do to feel more connected? Because it's very important to feel connected with your colleagues, whether it's about work or about other interests. While they're still working remotely or working from home, what can they do to feel more connected? Do you have any experience in that, or do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Rahul, I think that, again, this is a very, very interesting question, right? What I found is every single country, aside from regulations, the preference, the current situation is completely different. In Hong Kong, for example, we're very lucky. We have a combination of working from home or in the office if needed, right? So therefore, I think from a recommendation point of view, if possible, if it's workable with your company and your team, is obviously to have a combination. And what I find is with the combination, you do actually end up appreciating both options a lot more because you understand there are pros and cons with working from home or working in the office. In relation to outside of Hong Kong, when I'm working with overseas colleagues who are currently working from home right now, like Singapore, Thailand, and Sydney, actually right now, I recommend really having more empathy with your team members who are restricted to follow the work from home policy. Just connect with them more often. Very, very small tips, like when you have Zoom calls, where if you talk with them, switch on the camera when you're Zooming with them, and maybe talk with them besides work to see how they're doing, how the kids are doing, obviously outside of work, et cetera, et cetera. And I think if you are utilizing the working from home strategy, my recommendation is, and this is speaking more from experience as well, I think I utilize it sensibly so that there's trust built with your stakeholders as well. So notwithstanding that you're not seeing each other in the same space, you're not going into the office at the same time, but you all know that there's trust within obviously the team, the businesses, that you are still obviously working and delivering, along timelines, et cetera, et cetera. I guess last but not least, understanding these policies are really, really ever-changing. So, for example, my colleagues, my team in Singapore, they are working from home 1 week and then 2 weeks, and then they're back in the office. So it's really, really ever-changing. So if you're either spending time in the office or working from home, I think make the most out of it and really, appreciate it and enjoy it.
Sorry. There's a problem at times working flexibly or working from home is that sometimes you lose sight of when actually the work ends when it begins, I find it sometimes at 11 p.m., just checking my email, just seeing maybe there are a couple of emails that are very important. A contract has come in, for example, any excuse to open a bottle of wine, Jessica, you've been working from office, I see. Do you, and probably you've worked from home or have flexible working, do you feel that you need to make a very important demarcation between your work times ending and when it starts? And how do you go about doing that? Or how do you be more strict about it?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It is something that we have heard quite a bit from our team members as they have in the past 18 months. Many of them globally been required to work from home. One of the key things that they found is that they no longer had demarcations in their day. And they would run into problems like the email started coming and a call happened and it's now 2 p.m. and I haven't showered today, right? Which is just, a real fundamental personal issue, or they don't quite know when to shut off. I mean, this is a very personal decision to some extent about how you like to structure your time when it is incredibly unstructured because you don't have a commute, right? Which did provide a lot of structure, so you can fall into too much flexibility where what that means is work just takes up all the flexible time that you have. For me personally, some of the way that I do this is that, and it helps because I have a child as well. So we do kind of have a rhythm for what the household is. And there are just times that I don't schedule calls, that I just put the phone away, or turn alerts off. So I just don't even, it's out of sight, out of mind. And I don't see that at all. I also block out my diary and basically say there will be no calls in this period, either because I just need to focus on what I need to do, drafting, so I don't get interrupted, or that's going to be time that I go to the gym. I actually put my gym time into my diary so that people cannot schedule during that time, and it's become a real commitment that now I feel like guilty because I've not obeyed my diary for avoiding or changing. And I do, that does happen, but that's some of the strategies that I use, and I also try to work with my team on as well, making sure that they're creating that personal space, that they are signing off. And if I'm hearing from them really late at night or very early in the morning, doing a check-in, that may be a personal preference, and I don't want to invade upon that. But I also want to make sure that they are getting their personal space and their time away from work, so that it doesn't eat into all of their personal space. They're still minding their non-negotiables. And I find that if you create that space where you can talk about these things rather openly, and people don't feel like, oh, if I say to my boss that I'm going to the gym, they'll think I'm not working and therefore I'm a non-productive employee, that no, it's fine. And I expect that, and I anticipate that you are taking care of yourself and doing that. And I don't look down upon it. That really helps them to set some boundaries that work for them.
Thank you very much. I think that's very important. And Julia, I know you've kind of touched on this, but also you presented during the Hong Kong Congress a session on future of work. And knowing the results now from the survey that we did of the people who are present here today about how they want more flexibility in their work. Do you see that happening right now? Do you see companies that you're working with allowing that right now? Or what's the landscape like around that topic, according to you?
Yeah, I mean, most of the companies we work with are going to be allowing hybrid working going forward. There are some who are very strict about, we want everyone back in the office. But if you read around this topic, and there's a lot on the internet, if you look at places like Inc. and Thrive, you'll see a lot of articles about, the reaction that employees had to being forced back to the office without any sort of dialogue. And that really did offside a huge swathe of the population. And in a situation where you might be struggling to retain talent or winning talent, that's an easy thing to avoid doing. So, making very didactic statements about everyone having to be back in the office, I think you need to unpick that and really understand if that's, a necessary strategy. Someone has just asked a question on this topic, which is making a comment about the impact of work from home on younger lawyers and their growth and development. And too many senior lawyers don't factor this into their work from home wishes. How how do you get that balance right? I mean, it's a great question because we have that in our team. My guys are a lot younger than I am, and their careers are just starting. I mean, I like to work flexibly, so I allow my team to work from home 2 days a week. But that doesn't mean we're not on the phone the whole time. Also, they like to come in later. I like to work early. So back in the day, could I have said, I need bums on seats at 9 o'clock in the morning? Sure. And that was historically how lawyers worked, but it's irrelevant now. So if they prefer to work later and start work later, and I prefer to work early and switch off early, we just have to communicate about what deadlines are. So I say, right, I need drafts of advice on my desk by 4 o'clock. Otherwise, I'm not going to look at it today. And that means the client doesn't get their work. You can work around that. We also schedule in advance times when we get the whole team in the office. So we make sure that we have at least 2 or 3 overlap days in the office with at least half of the team being in. So those things are really important for that career development. And I also do, with Zoom, we have spent a lot more time having more team members included in Zoom meetings rather than just one-on-ones with clients. And whilst that feels a little bit heavy-handed, and don't worry, clients, we don't charge for it, it's really important that people keep their hand in on that dialogue and sort of hear that communication, even if they are working from home. So I think those are really important issues.
Great, thank you very much. And Tze-Wei, I'd like to just ask you to join in and maybe answer this question from your perspective, when somebody's asked about the impact of working from home on younger lawyers and their growth and development. I know you mentioned earlier that your senior lawyers or the colleagues that you work with are quite understanding and quite flexible. But how does one get the balance right? There's a case to be made over here that you could just take it as freedom working from home and having so much time and not actually put a lot of time to work as well. This could go either way, actually. So do you have anything to share on that, Tze-Wei?
Yeah, sure. Maybe more junior, not sure younger, but yes, I think definitely. I think that it goes back to that trust that we have built already as a team, and I think with that trust there, we do respect deadline, and we do know that we need to support our team and our partner to deliver when it comes to clients. But so the policy in with our firm is that it is an evolving policy, and in fact, we also have set up a future of work committee, as I found out yesterday, more details about it. So the policies for each office is slightly different. And the one in Hong Kong right now was when COVID was more serious, we were encouraged not to come into office. But now is we are welcome to come into office if we want, but if we want to work from home, we can notify a line manager without giving reasons. So I quite appreciate that flexibility there. What I find hard sometimes, though, is that actually the more we work at home, that soft connection between colleagues do erode, I think, and you need to be intentional about not letting that erode. And I heard Amy mentioned how it's also important not to just talk about work. And that's absolutely true, because we are so Zoom fatigued right now. Whenever we are on a call, we may just want to get the business done. But really scheduling a time where the whole team sit together to kind of create a punchy side talk atmosphere is quite important. And actually, our team, our private wealth team, has done it across offices as well. We have our London and Dubai and Hong Kong, Singapore, our colleagues doing it together. So initially, it's a bit weird because you try not to talk about work and just talk about non-work in a kind of artificial environment. But then the conversation gets going, and I do appreciate that effort for us to get to know each other better on a personal basis and what each other is going through. So yeah, being aware of creating that non-work chat. And I also appreciate when Jessica said how it is important to let people know it's okay to take time off, to go to the gym, to have your own time and space, because it is very easy to feel guilty about doing that and not remembering that's part of self-care during a time like this. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tze-Wei. And we were talking about how most of the participants in the survey said that they rather work flexibly. A lot of them who are working from home also. They would like to work flexibly. I think it's also something that's very unique to Hong Kong, because our apartments, our houses over here they don't have much space. And you'd want to get out, you feel cooped up in the house. You want to get out, you want to work from a professional atmosphere. And offices in Hong Kong are beautiful, overlooking, our harbor, beautiful buildings and everything. We've got nice restaurants. So you'd want to be out around that side, I guess. Now, what I want to talk about, and also something that you've all touched on, is culture and creating that safe space to talk about, either your requirement for flexibility or your mental well-being issues. So I'd like to share, I think this is the last survey result that I have to share. So let me just quickly share this slide. Okay. Right, not this, but this. We asked all the attendees, do you feel heard when you speak about your mental well-being to your colleagues? Majority, 55% of you said, I talk about it and I do feel heard. I think this is very important, and that's a great trend. But 31% said, I don't talk about it. So they are not talking about it for various reasons. One of the reasons could be, I assume, that the companies have not created a safe space for them to talk about their issues. And 14% said that they do talk about it, but don't feel like that they are heard. There's nothing being done about it, probably. And that could also tie into work-life balance, where the person that they're talking to just has so much work that all these other things suggest, we can talk about it later. Let's focus on the work. This is something that I've heard from a friend of mine, actually, who's an in-house counsel in Hong Kong, that he went to his seniors and said, all this work has taken a toll on me, my family issues, spending time with my family. And, he wasn't really heard. And the conversation quickly moved on to work. So this is something that I'd like to talk about. We all should talk about today. So my question actually is to Julia. In your experience helping organizations with their employment issues, what are organizations who create a mentally healthy work environment are doing right? What are they doing right?
As I said at the beginning, I think what people are doing right at the sort of more advanced end of the spectrum is listening, and listening in a smarter way. So the days of the annual employee engagement survey are dead officially. I think most HR practitioners will tell you that. Companies are using much more sort of up-to-date pulse technology. So they're taking very, very quick pulses of the organization that allow them to really see that sort of ebb and flow of feeling about different elements that people are concerned about. And that can allow managers to get on top of those issues very, very quickly and sort of see signs of distress or problem, in real time, so that they can actually sort of take immediate action. That's really important. Some companies actually have it's kind of a live system that sits on your screen, and you can actually input how you're feeling, and that kind of gives the organization, again, much more real data. I think the other thing, which may be a little bit unpopular for some companies, is there's been I think one of the training companies in the US said there's been a 3,000% uptake in anxiety training over the last 12 months. There's been 1,200% increase in resilience training. Unfortunately, the dialogue has moved past resilience training. A one-off training is not a panacea to this problem. And actually, there's a huge amount of frustration when you look at commentary. A lot of people are really angry that companies seem to say resilience training is how the company's passing the buck. And, I'm now meant to have the skills to deal with this, rather than fixing the underlying problem that led to that sort of impact of me feeling like I'm struggling. So I think we have to take those good things and say, yes, okay, some of the skills stuff is great. And, we do it as an organization as well. But we can't then abdicate responsibility for fixing any underlying structural issues or inequalities in how we've set up our systems and our workplaces, whether that's work from home or working in the office, whatever that may be. We've got to fix the underlying causes, and just so not relying on those sort of one-off pieces of training.
I should really know when to unmute myself, right? So before I ask this question around this topic of creating a safe space and the role of an in-house legal department internally. I'd like to just ask Tze-Wei about her experience and about company culture, mental well-being. I know that this is something that's quite dear to you. Would you like to share some of your insights?
Sure, thank you, Rahul. Again, I come from like more my ESG research as I try to raise awareness about some of these issues. We mentioned your survey is interesting, as in like actually majority of people feels like when they talk about mental health, they feel heard. And I wonder what was being conveyed in those conversations, because also mental health covers a wide spectrum. Are they also comfortable to just say they're feeling they're under a lot of stress or anxiety, or is there something more serious? We talked about millennials and Gen Z earlier. So I read a very interesting survey, again, from Brian's whole business wellness white paper. It's called the Deloitte Millennial Survey in 2000. And it found that like almost 50% of Gen Z and millennials say that they are stressed most of the time, and they also think that stress is a legitimate reason to take time off work. But of those who would do so, only 44% of millennials and 38% of Gen Zs would actually admit that it's due to stress and anxiety. And that number for women is even higher, that they would not admit. And millennials who were candid about their absences were 3 times as likely to say that their organizations provided strong mental health support. So I think there's definitely still a lingering stigma around mental health issues. And I think even when I said that our team are very open about like our work life, our workload, etc., and the stress that we face in our personal lives, I would say I haven't heard like a direct explicit mention that I am feeling under a lot of stress recently, and I'm not sleeping well, I'm feeling anxious. Like I personally, I have not heard that, but I would like to share there's one initiative that my firm has introduced since April this year, and it's called Hello Self. And this is where the company has lined up a counselor who is available to all offices on a very easy appointment booking system, and where it's all done confidential. And apparently the take-up has been quite good, and is from all offices across the world. And one idea is also taking into the differences in culture, because I think in Asia, people tend even not to want to mention their mental well-being more than, say, I guess in a London office. And so by having a global program, it seems to have been able to allow more from Asia to take up the initiative without being too obvious about it. So, yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think as somebody's typed in a question, and it's more of a statement than a question. And I think it's true that a lot of the things that we are discussing, how companies are more cognizant of mental well-being of their employees. In Hong Kong, at least, it tends to be more, at least this person thinks, that this person is anonymous, thinks that it's mostly multinational corporations. But for many Hong Kong companies, there is a huge cultural resistance within the management to some of the practices that we guys are talking about. And what you mentioned, having a counselor, I'm not sure a lot of the Hong Kong companies would have that initiative. And that's the whole point of having this conversation. If the anonymous listener, the question, the person is listening, it's something that you might wish to talk about. If you have a safe space in your work, you might want to talk about or bring this up, of having somebody there who's a professional to come and help and listen.
Rahul, I was just going to add, and I'm sure the others have a lot to say on that topic, but I absolutely agree with the question that was raised, which is, there is a huge difference in approach between multinationals and smaller companies, but also how management wants to implement locally. And that's fine. We do recognize that. I think a lot of what we're talking about is best practice. And you can set standards at a global level that will have to be implemented in a different way in different places, which is fine. I think what we've seen work quite well is that having some sort of flexibility in different teams that have different, levels of comfort with some of this dialogue allows people to sort of visualize what's happening in some teams without it necessarily causing a conflict, but it does start to slowly change the dialogue. Even with some of those more resistant managers, they start to see, oh, well, actually that team is really engaged, and my guys are kind of engaging in that other team's dialogue, and so maybe I need to kind of slowly come on board with that. It's a little bit of influencing round the side, but I'm sure Amy and Jessica and others have experienced it directly.
Great. Amy, would you like to comment on that? And just in general about, how does an in-house legal department feature within creating that culture of having a safe space of listening?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Julia said. I mean, look, each company is really, really different. It's moving obviously in its own pace, but I think it's important to recognize everything that we've talked about. There are also actually at the same time, a lot of companies are doing these best practices, and lawyers or other employees, they're looking obviously in Hong Kong, but also outside of Hong Kong, and recognizing these are best practices that's being put in place, within companies. So I think it's important that if the company that you're working for are not actually have these things in place, maybe to start the dialogues, and again, just understand, now, currently, these are things which are happening. Very, very quickly, the culture of listening, Rahul. I think I just want to say that it takes it takes time and conscious effort to actually create that atmosphere. My experience, it doesn't actually happen by itself. So I think as leaders, managers of team, I think we're really, really encouraged to think about initiatives that can help our team, our employees to foster that talking and listening culture. I think by staying open, what I find is the team members really, really appreciate it. And I think they also actually end up willing to talk about, obviously, the situations, their workload, the families, what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. I think another practical tip is, I think, again, as leaders and managers, we can set example by really, really talking more and sharing first and communicating with our team members as to what's happening in our life, both in work and outside of the work. Again, with that sharing and communication culture within the team, what I find is, again, your team members, your employees, your colleagues will follow, and then they're more willing to talk and listen as well. So I think it's really time and conscious effort to foster that, atmosphere, but it takes time.
Thank you very much for that. Jessica, would you like to add to that in your experience internally with your department?
And I think probably what really comes to mind, I think there's a couple points I could add. And one is that while there can be a unique Hong Kong aspect to this challenge, it's also industry-wide. So one of the things that when we as an institution adopted the Mindful Business Charter, trying to kind of internally as a legal department find ways to work with each other that was more mindful to avoid what we call avoidable workplace stress. As we rolled it out, and this was not only internally, but also working with our law firms, what we actually found is that some firms were very willing to sign up to this. They were 100% on board, and other firms completely rejected it. And in fact, we saw certain firms actually market to say, we don't comply with the Mindful Business Charter, and that means that we're there for you 100% of the time, and we will be at your beck and call whenever you need us, which was a bit of a surprise, but actually is indicative of where kind of the broader profession is on these issues. It is a journey. We are talking a lot about the best practices, but the profession and each individual firm, in-house or external, are at a very different place. And some of them are not on that journey really at all. And so then if you want to yourself or your team want to start using more of these, I think to some extent you have to focus on what can you control. right? What can you control individually? Are there practices that you do that you bring upon yourself? I find lawyers are often terrible at managing their own selves and their own time. So step one, are there things that you can control and do differently, maybe step by step, that will kind of create more mental health space for you? Are there things that you can do with your team that might create a bit more of that space and a bit more of that culture? What are those things that you can control? Because one thing that really produces stress is trying to control things that you cannot possibly control. So that's something that, can maybe start to make some headway. Can you have some of those initial conversations to get some more buy-in in your organization to open up that space? How would you go about doing that? Again, what's within your realm of control? It's not an easy answer. I think we do have to be very honest about where the profession is and where some of our individual companies are, and the fact that there are not people who are on this journey. We certainly saw that as an organization. The last thing I'll say is when we started rolling out the Mindful Business Charter and certain mental health initiatives, there were indeed line managers who did not adhere, did not support, did not want to support. We saw that coming out through as an organization. We had created more of a space of listening organization wide. And that was something that certain people in management took back to try to work with those teams and those people to adapt what they call the line manager commitment, to bring that into performance reviews as one way to go about it. They're not always easy solutions. It's not by the way, we're all mindful now and we're all stress-free and everything's great and everybody's got great mental health and everybody likes to talk about it. It's not like that, but you can start to chip away at those things that you can control. I think that's really the only strategy that you can use for some of that.
Sure. And I think those are really good points and also actionable takeaways for all the attendees today. I think a couple of things that you mentioned over there, one being that looking inwards, looking within your own department or within your own organization and asking what can you control and what you can control, how you can make it better, how you can make it easier or innovate in a way that it becomes easier for you and your colleagues. Moving on, I wanted to talk about the relationship between the in-house counsel and the private practice lawyers. One thing that in-house counsel always tell us what they appreciate in their private practice lawyers or the external counsel is responsiveness. And that ties in really into your work-life balance. So we've kind of discussed that. So I'd like to skip that and talk about self-care, which is very important. And just, I'd like to throw a poll out to all the attendees, a very quick sort of straw poll, and ask all the attendees to fill this in. What is your preferred self-care activity? Panelists, you all should be able to answer this as well. So what is your preferred self-care activity? Right, we've got yoga, we've got exercise, running or hiking or any kind of physical exercise, to be honest. Meditation, for a lot of people, Netflix. A lot of people are just too busy with work for self-care. So we've got, I think, about 101 people who've answered this, 106 now. So I'll just end the poll and share the results. So exercise, running and hiking. Well, in Hong Kong, hiking is obviously very, very popular. Netflix, quite a lot of people, right? A lot of people watching Squid Games, I guess, nowadays. Yoga, that's very important and quite helpful. Meditation, not so much. I personally, I'm a big believer in meditation. And even if you can take out a minute or 2 minutes of your time just to close your eyes and take everything out from your mind, I think it does wonders. Right. And this is very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing your preferred self-care routine. I'd like to ask the attendees here today, what did you choose? Starting off with Jessica, do you have any preference
No, I'm definitely in the exercise camp.
Right.
And that's something that has long been an aspect of my life that I find really important. It actually has physical benefits, but it has mental benefits as well. I get to listen to whatever music I want for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour. I don't have to think about anything in particular. I just let my brain go completely crazy. And then I come back to work refreshed. Sometimes I think about work, sometimes I don't. Who knows? It doesn't matter. It just creates that, that space in my day during the week where I do something else entirely and I just focus on me. And I find that really useful. Sometimes I have my best ideas while I'm doing that. Sometimes I have no ideas whatsoever. And there's just zero judgment applied to that. And so I find that really useful, and I just put it right in my diary and I go and do it, and it's such a huge benefit. I always come back feeling much more refreshed.
Wonderful. I think somebody's mentioned that the self-care options in the poll were quite limited. Of course, they were very, very limited. The person has mentioned, Maylim actually has mentioned that that we all would like to take self-time home and read, listen to music, cook or bake, or getting a pedicure, something that I've done quite recently. So so that's great. Thank you very much. Tze-Wei, we talked about going to the gym and how important it is and also Jessica mentioned this, how important it is to put it in your diary as a almost non-negotiable. Is something that you do as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I needed it to be part of my daily routine, so to make sure that I go to it. So yes, I think we talk about finding a gym that's close to either your work or home. Otherwise, you never make it there. I'm not so much of a gym person. I can't really sit still, so yoga is my meditation. And I think in my previous presentation, I've shared how diving and swimming are very important to my mental health, and I try to stick to doing them as regularly as I can. Yeah.
Wonderful. And I didn't know this, but Hong Kong is actually a great place for diving, and you can ask if you have some time. You can ask Tze-Wei all about it, and she'll be very happy to share that information. Amy, how about you? What would you like to share with the attendees today about creating your own self-care time?
For me, number one is hiking. I mean, Hong Kong is a great place. I think you can always find a really, really good hike within relatively short, period of time from where you live. And recently, I've actually spoke to my colleagues about this as well. And one thing that she brought up, which I find is very, very true, is just really finding time to talk to your friends. Obviously we're messaging, we're emailing, but just pick up your phone and just spend time and just talk to your friends. I think it's really, really amazing. After you connected with one of your friends, it worked wonders for both yourself and your friend as well. So I think that's a really, really great tip. It's just to talk with, friends that you haven't spoken with for a long time.
Great. And lastly, but not least, Julia, do you have anything to share? What's your routine like, and what you would like to talk about, how best attendees in-house counsel can create time for themselves for self-care?
Well, my answer differs pre-COVID versus now. So, I mean, before COVID, I used to go to Africa once a year. That's my thing, and do a digital detox. So no, and I would tell people like a month in advance, I will have no internet connection, I will have no phone, and you'll be fine, and no one dies. Not doing open heart surgery. Amazingly, you come back and there's no problem. So that was what I used to do before COVID. Now it's very much, I think, same as everyone else. It's, putting in your diary some gym time or so hiking at the weekends. And actually I read a lot more now. So I make sure I read at least a couple of chapters of my book before I go to bed. So I put down the iPhone, turn off the computer, and really sort of make sure that I've got some reading time, because that helps just move my mind away from different things.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And this is all the time we have today. I hope everybody got some great pointers to take away and start implementing right away. You have pointers about how you can maintain a good work-life balance, about flexible working, and also about your self-care routine. One takeaway is if you can convince your colleagues about having somebody come into the office and really listen to you, like either a psychologist or a counselor. So thank you very much, everyone, and hopefully we can meet together in person. And thank you for taking out the time today to share your insights with everyone. Today we had, just to remind everyone, Amy Ng, Jessica Bartlett, Julia Gorham, Tze-Wei, and thank you very much to you all.